All right, welcome. We're going to get started. Welcome to Wayne State University and the second session of Orientation Part 2, or the second session. My name is Zeina Ghoul. I coordinate the Study Skills Academy. It's a part of the Academic Success Center, and I'll tell you a little bit about our services and all of the resources we have to offer a little bit later in this session. But let's truck along. I have a couple of announcements to make before we do talk about our sleep session. And importantly, I want to first make a land acknowledgement, and I want to apologize if I am pronouncing anything incorrectly. I'm doing my best. Wayne State University rests on the Wyandotong land, also referred to as Detroit, the ancestral and contemporary homeland of the Three Fires Confederacy. These sovereign lands were granted by the Ojibwe, Adwa, Potawatomi, and Wyandot nations in 1807 through the Treaty of Detroit. Wayne State University affirms Indigenous sovereignty and honors all tribes with a connection to Detroit. With our Native neighbors, Wayne State University can advance educational equity and promote a better future for the earth and all people. Thank you. And then some things to remember. I think you probably know this from your last session, but I want to just make sure that we're all aware. This session is recorded. It's available for playback on the O2 website, and it will be available by the end of the week. All of the microphones are muted, but please ask questions in the chat. So I'm going to be looking at the chat when I can. I'd like this to be a very informal session, so I will get to you as fast as I can. But if I'm not, I'm going to also drop my email address in here. If there's something I don't get to, please go ahead and send me an email at any time. Good question. There's a question here about attendance. So the attendance is not working for this presentation. We won't be using a link. Okay, so I want to make sure everyone's aware of that. You don't have to worry about it. Closed captioning is available. So to access live captioning, click on the button in the bottom menu bar. And again, it says, please make sure to click on the attendance link. You don't have to worry about that, okay? They're going to be able to track your attendance through Zoom. All right, so we will talk about sleep, fuel for your brain and body. And as I said, this is going to be a pretty flexible presentation. I am going to talk a little bit about kind of what happens when we sleep and the science behind it very briefly, but then a lot of the other part of the presentation is going to be asking you questions. So I really hope that you do engage. If there's something that you don't want everyone else to know, you can always just send me the message privately and I won't say your name. I can just, talk about that information. Okay, so all right, so Olivia, there's a couple questions if you don't mind answering those. I think you can answer them better than I can. Thank you.
Yeah, after this session, there is there's another link at 4 p.m. called Speak About It, Creating a Culture of Consent, and I can try to drop that in the chat for you guys, but you should have it as well. I think it's optional. And as far as attendance, there's no need to worry about it. You won't be penalized or anything. We're just trying to see how many people are attending for data purposes, and we are able to just see it on our recorded Zoom calls because these meetings are all being recorded.
Yeah, thank you so much, Olivia. All right. Okay, so these are the presentation objectives that I have. I think gaining awareness is very important, just of your current sleep difficulties, understanding why sleep is so important for academic success and mental well-being. So again, I'm from the Study Skills Academy. Why are we talking about sleep here? There's a reason for it, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about some techniques to improve sleep quality in college and beyond, okay? I want to hear, though, if there are some specific things, maybe some expectations you had coming into this presentation that you would like to focus on. but before we move on to some think, pair, share questions. So if you have any expectations, or maybe there's some things that you would like me to touch on, I'll do my best. If you could write that in the chat, that would be great. Yes, I talk a bit about sleep management. Okay, so you're all, it sounds like maybe people are here like with an open mind to see what we have to talk about. Okay, if those objectives seem good with you, then we'll truck along. Okay, so I'd like to do a few just think, pair, share questions, and we're just going to focus on the first two here, okay? First of all, what are your current thoughts and feelings about sleep? Okay, so if you can just write that in the chat. Okay, I love it, it's good, I don't get enough of it, need more, don't prioritize it, okay. Indifference. Gives me some energy through the day. Don't get much, my favorite time of the day. Okay. So there's a lot of mixed things I'm hearing here. Some people are indifferent. Some people really like it. Some people don't really care too much. Yeah, some people wake up, okay, oddly at 4 o'clock. Okay. Okay. And then what do you think? Okay, so the second question is, I think I want to word it as, how do you think your sleep will differ once you start college? Which, I mean, our first day is tomorrow, right? September 1st is when we start. How do you think your sleep might change as a result of you being a college student? Okay, some people said they think it would be better. Some people think less sleep, very little. It'll get worse, get less of it, the same. Okay. Okay. So yeah, a lot of different mixed views. And so can't fully predict it, right? You'll have to see how it goes. But I think that's why I wanted to bring that up, is a lot of students, have this idea that once you get to college, you're not going to be able to sleep anymore. It's just sleep is taken away. It's not necessary. You should be staying up all night studying. You should be drinking tons of coffee or caffeine or energy drinks in order to stay up. There's really just this preconceived idea that a lot of college students have, and it's simply not true. It's actually very destructive. So I want to share with you a little bit about what happens when we sleep, what factors control sleep, and what happens when we don't get enough sleep, to help convince you otherwise if you think that it's not. It's really an investment in your success, okay? Okay, so a little bit about your sleep. So I'm going to be talking a little bit in here, but if you have some things you want to add about what happens when we sleep, maybe you've taken a psych class. In the last group I had, there were a few students who took psychology, and they remembered some things that they learned about the sleep cycle. So if there's some things you remember and you want to add to this, please let me know. I'm going to give a very easy, quick rundown version. So when we sleep, there's different stages, okay? And you can see, depending on who you ask, there's about 4 or 5 different stages of sleep. And each stage combined is one sleep cycle. And throughout your sleep, if you're sleeping about 7.5 to 9 hours, you're getting between 4 to 5 of these different cycles per night. We can take a look here. We're just going to start at stage 1, okay? And this is when we're first starting to get into sleep. Our muscle tone throughout our body relaxes. Our brainwave activity begins to slow down. So we have different types of brainwave activities, like when we're awake, looks very different. It's more in the alpha, beta. And then when we're going to sleep, it's a different mixture. We have more alpha and theta brain waves. Stage 2 is also non-REM sleep. That's when we have brain waves continuing to slow down. We have different bursts of rapid activity, and these are known as sleep spindles mixed with sleep structures known as K complexes, okay? Kind of a tongue twister there. But both these sleep spindles and then also the K complexes, the reason why I'm bringing them up is because they kind of help serve as protection for the brain from awaking from sleep. And they're also important part of memory consolidation. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So you all want to be able to have great memories, right? When you're studying, you want to remember that information. So part of where that's taking place, helping our memory, is stage 2 of non-REM sleep. Our body temperature during this stage 2 is also decreasing. It's also where we have our body processes, our emotions, our metabolism is regulating itself during this stage. So you may have heard, I'm kind of going a little bit off topic here, but those who don't sleep as well might have issues with obesity. And that could be partly why, because this is where our metabolism is being regulated. So let's go on to stage 3. This is very, very important stage as well. This is where deep sleep is occurring. This is the most restorative stage of our sleep. And this is when our body is repairing our muscles, our tissues. We're stimulating growth and development. HGH, our human growth hormone, is being released. And it boosts our immune function, builds energy for the next day. This is where a lot of our memory consolidation is also occurring too, okay? And then stage 4 is an even deeper sleep. Sometimes stage 3 and 4 is combined depending on who you ask. But really our heart rate and our temperature is even slower. And then this one you probably are very aware of is REM sleep occurs about 90 minutes after falling asleep, and then our brain is more active during this stage. Your eyes actually are moving very rapidly from side to side behind our closed eyelids, and we have mixed frequency activity becomes closer is what is seen in wakefulness, okay? But we're not able to move because our body's paralyzed at that point, okay? And then after your REM sleep, you kind of go ahead. It doesn't actually occur in like exact stages and cycles. You might skip around a little bit, but this is an idea of what happens during the different stages, okay? As you go deeper into your sleep, so later into the night, that's when actually you have even more of your REM sleep is more so than in the beginning stages of sleep, of course. Okay. All right, so let me just check the chat really quick to see if anyone added something, maybe some things that you learned when you were in high school or things that you read about. Okay, I don't see any. I did have just a really quick question. I won't name names because it was private, about signing into Zoom through Facebook. Again, don't worry about receiving credit. We know that the link is not working very well right now, so not something you have to worry about. So I want everyone to just rest assured. Okay, so some factors that are occurring during sleep, or the control sleep, rather. Sleepiness usually happens about 16 hours before the typical person gets tired. So if after we've been up for about 16 hours, we get tired. However, things like sleep disorders, insomnia can throw a person's sleepiness off, of course. And I am in no way giving any medical advice. I do want to make that disclaimer. If you are dealing with some serious sleep issues, make sure you meet with your primary care doctor. So that's definitely something very important to consider. I will give at the end just some very basic tips that you can get through some of the textbooks that we read in FYS 1010, and I'll talk a little bit about that course later. Okay, so Zeitgebers, it's kind of a funny name, right? What is that? So that's actually a cue in our environment that give ourselves, that get ourselves to sleep. So this could be light. So way back when people didn't have alarm clocks, I mean, they got up when the sun got up. They went to sleep when the sun went down. Zeitgeber could be a pre-ritual that we have before we go to sleep, or a pre-sleep ritual rather. So it really could be a lot of different things, but a big one, a big Zeitgeber is our association that our brain has with our bed. So that's why you want to make sure that you're just using your bed for sleep, okay? You do not want to study in your bed. I want to make that clear. If you are doing that, you're not going to be as productive. It's going to be a lot more difficult to focus too. And then also it's going to offset your ability to sleep. I do understand that we're all in different situations right now with COVID. You know, thinking about the best that you can do in this very difficult situation. If your bed is your only, place that you have, I'm definitely not saying don't study there. I'm saying if you do have the option, so to work on your schoolwork at another place than your bed, please do that. Psychoactive substances, so that has a big impact on sleep. So for example, if a student is taking too much caffeine, that's a psychoactive drug, or considered one. There's actually a research study done in part by a researcher at Wayne State University. So as you probably know, Wayne State is a level 1 research university. And this study was done on the effects of caffeine on sleep. And it was found even taking caffeine 6 hours before bed can have a detrimental effect. And I'll talk a little bit about caffeine in that later, but make sure that you understand that that can have a big impact on your quality, even if you are sleeping 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep. If you're drinking caffeine about 6 hours before, or if you're eating chocolate, which has caffeine in it too, that can affect your quality of sleep. And as we saw from the previous slide, that deep sleep, that stage 3, stage 4, is where our memories are being consolidated. It's where our immune system's getting a boost, our human growth hormones being secreted more. So that's going to all be impaired by caffeine. And not just caffeine, other things like medications. Some medications can have impacts on that. And I won't get into that. Again, that's why I say speak with your physician. Circadian rhythm. So you've probably all heard of what a circadian rhythm is, right? That's also known as people's biological clocks. So some people are night owls, some people are larks. Are you a lark or are you a night owl? Let me know in the chat here. So we can be predisposed to that based on how we evolved. For a lot of adolescents, teenagers, 18 to 20, a lot of you will be night owls, but that can definitely shift as you get older too. Some people are in between. It really does depend. So know that about yourself, and when you're picking your classes as well. If you're a night owl, maybe don't pick that 7:30 calculus class like I made the mistake of doing. So know that as well. And even though we are remote, some of your classes you'll still have to log in at a certain time, so that can have an effect. So a lot of you are night owls. I see a couple early birds, a bit of both. Yeah, some people are in the middle too. So basically our circadian rhythm, it has a lot of different functions. So there's daily fluctuations in wakefulness. Our body temperature has an impact on that. Metabolism, hormones, the release of hormones. Hormones are everything. They control our sleep too. They control just a lot of our physiology. They control our timing of sleep, and they can cause you to be sleepy at night and your tendency to wake in the morning without an alarm. It's ideal if you can wake up without an alarm clock. When you wake up without an alarm clock, most of the time you're waking up in a lighter stage of sleep. You're not waking up in a deeper sleep as you might with an alarm clock. And sometimes that's why you might feel really groggy, is when you wake up with an alarm clock and you might be waking up in stage 3, you're in a very deep stage. and it can be difficult. So again, I know that's not realistic for everyone, but if you do certain, you pay attention to your circadian rhythm, and you do things that help reduce, for example, light exposure that might conflict with your hormones, you can reduce a lot of that too, and maybe waking up in a more natural time for your body. Okay, so just really quickly, I want to touch on a few hormones and neurotransmitters that can control sleep. I'm sure you all have heard of melatonin, right? You can kind of scary, but you can even take melatonin. You can get it over the counter. It's a hormone, okay? It regulates our body's sleep-wake cycle. It's influenced by light. So when you're going to bed, one of the worst things you can do to prep yourself for bed is being exposed to very bright light, okay? That bright fluorescent light. That's telling your brain, hey, don't produce melatonin because it's light outside. You're gonna stay up, okay? I know a lot of you probably know that there's like on your cell phone, there's a way that you can reduce the blue light. That's great, but still that exposure to electronics can be detrimental, but I digress. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So light exposure can definitely have an impact. As you can see from this chart on the screen, melatonin levels are in the red. And melatonin actually increases right before we go to bed. It peaks up here. So if we are being exposed to a lot of light, that decreases melatonin. And it's going to be really difficult to go to bed. Cortisol, you probably heard of this. This is the stress hormone, as it's known as. And it's a necessary hormone. It's not something that we want to do away with, but it works in opposition to melatonin. So cortisol is actually decreasing right before we go to bed, and that's so we can go to sleep. We don't want to be hopped up on too much cortisol before we go to bed, right? Because we don't want to be too stressed. But what happens is if we are too stressed, that can have an effect on our ability to sleep because we'll ramp up the cortisol levels. So having some type of nighttime routine where you're doing something to de-stress can really offset that. And then the last one I want to talk about is adenosine. And this is basically a byproduct of our brain cells use ATP. You probably heard that for energy, right? It's a byproduct of ATP. And so it actually builds up in our brains after so many hours of being awake, and there's nothing we can do about it. But if we do things like consume caffeine, that will temporarily offset adenosine buildup. But after the caffeine wears up, we still have that buildup of adenosine, and we're going to be tired. So some of you, if you've ever pulled an all-nighter or stayed up really late, you might have noticed like around a certain time you get that second wind of energy, but then like a few hours later or a couple hours later, it decreases, and that's because your adenosine is still built up. So if you're pulling all-nighters, it's not going to impact just that night. It's going to impact the next few nights because you're playing with your hormones there too, okay? All right, so let's move on. I want to get an idea here of, on average, how many hours of sleep do you get a night? So if you can write that in the chat just so we can see what the average is. Okay, so I'm seeing 2 to 4. Is that for real? That's pretty low. It's pretty low there. 4 to 6. Okay, geez. Not a lot of sleep. We had a lot more people sleeping in the last session. Okay, there's some that are 7 to 9. Okay, thumbs up for you. Hours, so I hope you're sleeping at least in hours. Okay, so very, very wide variety then. So the reason I ask this is because sleeping in a lot of people are I'm seeing like 6, I'm seeing 5. A lot of people think 6 hours of sleep is enough, okay? Like that's, I think what's reported, the average hours that the average American thinks is a good amount of sleep. But research shows that just simply is not enough. And based on what we talked about in the last few slides, I mean, you saw the sleep cycle, you saw kind of what some factors are that control sleep. So it should be no surprise that 6 hours is not enough for certain reasons. So what happens is a lot of students think that sleep is like a bank, okay? But it's actually not. You can't make up for a lack of sleep during the weekdays. So you can't, like if you're sleeping for 4 hours a night during the week and you think you're gonna sleep for 12, 10 hours during the weekend, which is what a lot of people do, I mean, hey, your circadian rhythm's still going. I mean, you can't fully offset that. You want to aim for 7 to 9 hours is what is recommended by Matthew Walker. He's a pretty prominent sleep researcher. Sleep should be sufficient, so you should get enough sleep. It should be consistent, so even on the weekends, you want to be waking up and going to bed around the same time. It should be restorative, so do you wake up feeling relaxed, or do you wake up feeling even more tired than when you went to bed? So again, things to think of and take note of. We said sleep is not a bank. Naps are okay, but if you take naps, you want to make sure that you're a person that can take them. How many of you are nap people, or how many of you are not? Okay, some, I see some hands up, or some yes and some no's in the chat. If you do take naps, what is recommended by Matthew Walker is you take your nap in between when you wake up and when you go to bed. So it's about in the middle. If you take, someone said I haven't taken a nap since I was 5. Yeah. Surprisingly, I'm going a little off topic, but there's a university where they have a class about sleep, and part of that, they actually take naps during the class because there's a correct way in taking naps. And so not only should you be taking a nap about in between when you get up and when you go to bed, because if it's too late or too early, that's going to offset your circadian rhythm, but you want it to be about 20 minutes to a half hour. And that's so you don't get too deep into your deep sleep stages. You don't want to wake up in that deep, like non-REM sleep where you'll be too tired and groggy. Or about 90 minutes. And that's because the 90 minutes you're going to go through one full cycle, okay? All right, so just remember, 6 hours of sleep is not enough. I want to quickly tell you about a study that Matthew Walker actually helped facilitate. And this was a study where we had 2 groups of participants, and of course there was a control group too. But one group, they slept for 6 hours a night for 10 nights. And then the other group, they were up for 24 hours. They didn't sleep, okay? Pulled an all-nighter. What they found at the end of the study was both groups actually had similar deficiencies, okay? They had similar deficiencies in terms of like their ability to retain information and just function, and also like their mental health too. What happens though is over time, if a person is used to getting 6 hours of sleep or less than optimal, you kind of just, that's what your normal is. You don't know anything else, right? So we kind of just get used to being on like that amount. I won't name names just for, you know, making sure that confidentiality is upheld. So I'll change some of this a little bit, but I had a student in my office that was consistently getting 4 hours of sleep a night, and he was doing that for years, and over time he was just exhausted. His body just started kind of shutting down, and just would fall asleep randomly because you can only function like that for so long, where it really starts to take a toll on you. And I know there's that kind of, not only is, you know, sleep isn't important, that is something that you hear a lot with college students. It's kind of that expectation, as we talked about before, that you won't get sleep. But I think also that hustle culture that's very prominent too, just kind of work, forget sleep. But in the long term and even the short term, it's really not productive to do that. So I think that based on what we talked about, you'd answer in a way that I think you will, but True or false? Do you think sleep deprivation can negatively impact academic performance? And if you think true, in what ways do you think sleep deprivation can impact your performance? Every way, yeah. Can you be more specific? Maybe grades will slip, memory, attention span. Anything else? Or maybe like you pulled an all-nighter in high school or tried to, and what happened? Okay, stress, losing focus, yeah. And so this, goes a lot. I run procrastination accountability groups, and we talk a lot about sleep too. You can procrastinate on sleep, but it's kind of a cycle that we go through. And I'm going to show you an example of a cycle of what happens with a lot of students with regards to procrastination and lack of sleep. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's really a combination of a lot of things that's happening. And as we talked about, sleep is an important part of the memory process. When you are awake and you're learning information, the sleep, you're kind of like telling your brain, hey, this is important. So it's kind of tagging this information. So when I say learning information, I mean giving your full focus, okay? If you're learning and like you're in your lecture, you're not paying attention, or you're on your cell phone like every 5 minutes while the professor's talking, you're not giving your brain that full attention. So that's not going to be tagged as important, okay? That information that is deemed as important to your brain, when you go to sleep, it's going to transfer from your hippocampus to the neocortex if you're getting that good quality sleep. Remember that stage 3 is mostly where it happens, although it's occurring all throughout sleep. So hippocampus is where more short-term information is being stored. Neocortex is where we have more long-term. So that's more of like unlimited supply, supposedly, of information we can retain in our neocortex. Whereas with the hippocampus, we can't store that much information. So just as it's important to transfer information from our hippocampus to our neocortex, it's also important to free up space in our hippocampus. So when we're sleeping, we're not only consolidating information, but we're also freeing space in our hippocampus, okay? So if you're pulling an all-nighter, your hippocampus is clogged. It's going to be really important to learn new information during that day too, okay? So that's just a little bit, again, just to emphasize that memory process, very important with sleep. I want to, so some people talked a little bit about this too already, but I want to see, for those of you who maybe didn't answer this question or didn't say something about emotions and physically, how do you feel emotionally and physically when you are sleep deprived? And I want to bring this up because, if you're not that great, doing that great, like how are you going to be able to study? So it all does tie in together to being able to study. So I see a lot of agitated, agitated, crabby, overwhelmed, annoyed, walking zombie, yes. Less motivated, absolutely. And that's part of where that procrastination comes from. Your prefrontal cortex is going to be hindered. So that's where executive functioning is taking place, where you're able to perform tasks that are in line with the goals that we want and things that we want in life. Tend to feel ill, sluggish, yeah. So you're all absolutely right. These are some side effects from missing sleep. And some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term. So we have those short-term effects like irritability, not be able to remember things, focus. So symptoms similar to ADHD, similar symptoms to anxiety, depression, mental health symptoms. If you're struggling with anxiety or depression, those symptoms are likely to be intensified if you're not getting the proper quality and quantity of sleep. Reaction time is decreased. So driving your vehicle on 4 hours of sleep is like driving your car while you are intoxicated. Very, very dangerous. Please don't do that. So over time, you know, we talked about growth hormone being released during certain stages of sleep. Cortisol can increase too. So you see long-term effects like suppression of growth, risk of obesity, things like that. Even type 2 diabetes can be increased too, looking long-term. So what if you have much, there's a question, what if you have much anxiety and depression and ADHD and you never get that much sleep? Definitely talk to your primary care physician or your, if you have a psychiatrist or someone that's monitoring your health. Definitely, I highly recommend that. Or if you're meeting with a therapist, that's going to be really important because those symptoms can definitely be intensified. All right. Yeah, correlation between anxiety and nightmares. You know, I don't know of a certain research study off the top of my head, but just from my own understanding, I would say possibly. So anxiety and nightmares, you probably heard of like Sigmund Freud. He was pretty big on interpreting dreams and how that has to do with our waking life. And we know that it's not exactly working that way. But my guess is if you're very anxious or you have a high amount of stress and that's reflected in maybe higher cortisol levels, and again, not to demonize cortisol, it's necessary, but if it's too much, I think that can definitely increase that we might have nightmares because we're still processing information when we are sleeping. Yeah. So possibly, possible. I won't say a yes or a no for that. Good question. So I'm going to skip this because we did talk about this. On average, you know, thinking about, you know, it should be at least 6 hours before you go to bed, decreasing that caffeine. And remember, caffeine is in not only coffee, it's also in soda. It's also in chocolate. So if you're eating like a lot of chocolate before bed, I mean, that's caffeine. So think about when, I'm not saying like get rid of caffeine fully, but I'm saying know your limits, okay? If you're not eating or drinking caffeinated products, that's great. College is a time when a lot of people start. So just monitor that. Something I'm going to ask you, and you don't have to answer this now, I want you to think about, I'm going to ask you in a second and go back to this, but what can you do to make sure you get enough sleep in college? And the reason why I'm so passionate about this topic, it's really important because it has a big impact on academic performance. I mean, this is just, it's a fact. And it's direct, it's indirect too. This data, and I'm sorry, I don't have the resource listed, it must have cut off, but it was from a survey that was done a few years ago across the United States with college students. It was shown that sleep is the third largest factor affecting college students' academic performance. Sleep difficulties, 21.8% of college students. That is a lot. Stress is one of the highest, anxiety, depression, and as we know from what we just talked about, those are all correlated. So if you're having sleep difficulties, you're probably more anxious and stressed and probably more depressed as well, okay? So it's really an important topic and thing to consider, thing to prioritize. I'm gonna go to the next couple slides and just show typical cycle of what college students in their sleep is like. And I've been in this role in different types of ways, working with the Academic Success Center for 8 years. And these are real scenarios kind of pieced together of what a lot of college students are like. But before I go there, I want to look at the chat. Okay, so you're saying when you sleep for 4 hours, you feel more energetic, and plenty of people told me the same. Is there an explanation to this? And so my thought process for this is because that person might be waking up in a later stage of sleep, okay? You can possibly, sleep very heavily, maybe even if you're sleeping 10 hours of sleep, but if you're waking up in a later stage of sleep, you might feel more groggy, okay? That is a possibility as to why that's occurring. And again, I can't say for sure because I don't know the physiology of these, specific people, but that is just my best guess. Consistently though, it's not likely to be stable. There is a very, very small percentage of people, and when I say small, I mean like 0.00%, 1%, that can function on less than 6 hours of sleep. If you think you're that type of person, you're probably not. It's a very small percentage. So, I think when we're thinking of sleep, I'm not saying, hey, you need to sleep exactly 8 hours of sleep. It's about your quality too, okay? And someone asked if there's a sign-in sheet, and Olivia answered that in the chat. Thank you, Olivia. Okay, so let's go to this cycle. I skipped that, sorry. Okay, so how it is for a lot of college students, unfortunately. So 2 a.m., they're going to bed feeling late and stressed. 11 a.m., they hit the alarm 5 times, struggle to get out of bed. I don't know about you, but if I hit the alarm clock too many times, I'm gonna feel a lot more tired than if I just get up. 10 a.m. too groggy and hungry to pay attention in class. So 11 a.m. eating fast food and for energy, and then crash and then take a nap. So I want you to see that link. It's not just like a lack of sleep can sometimes affect our food choices because again, our prefrontal cortex is not working as efficiently. So we might make poor decisions, like the food we eat, the decisions we make. So 3 p.m. rolls around, that students, very unfocused, they're groggy, they feel stressed out. 5 p.m. rolls around. 7, they're watching Netflix to calm down, and they're procrastinating. They think, okay, I'll focus later, I'll stay up. 11 a.m. they finish their assignment, they stay up late finishing their assignment, and then that cycle kind of repeats. I don't know if any of you can relate to having some sort of cycle like this, where you're trapped in going to bed late, waking up late too, or just noticing how not getting enough quality or quantity of sleep is impacting just other areas of your life too. So I want you to think about that, and this isn't, this is something maybe to think about after too, how that's impacting you. And so how it could be, I'm going to go over this really quick because we don't have much time, but if you are preparing and doing things to ensure that you're getting enough sleep, I mean, of course, not taking into maybe factors like insomnia and things like that, where you need to speak with your primary care physician or physician. Doing things like healthy food choices, exercise, taking breaks, doing your homework on time, are all beneficial to that balance. And I don't want to minimize the situation that we're all going through right now with the pandemic. I understand things are difficult, and I do want to acknowledge that. That's why we have so much support in place, because we want to work with you to help you wherever you're at in whatever situation that is. And we can work with you in many different ways, and I'm going to show you that at the end of this. But really quick, I want to go over just some sleep tips, and some of you went over these too. If you have some sleep tips that have helped you, if you can write that in the chat so we can all learn from each other, that would be really helpful too. But I want to just go over a few. So I said putting away electronics and bright lights at least 30 minutes before sleep. So again, even being on your cell phone, if the blue light's off, is still stimulation. It's going to keep your brain active, too active, where that might decrease or be detrimental to you going to sleep. Keeping a journal to keep track of energy levels. So recognizing, like taking a moment, maybe taking a week or a couple weeks where you wake up and write about what are your energy levels, how are you feeling, and why are you feeling the way you're feeling? So you build awareness to why you're not necessarily feeling alert and energetic. So doing things like that, journaling, can really be beneficial to creating awareness and facilitating change. Using your bed only for sleep. We talked about that and why it's important. Not eating too close to bedtime. So again, like part of our circadian rhythm, our digestive system actually kind of wakes up and goes to sleep at certain times. So based on where you are in the world and your circadian rhythm, Detroit Eastern time, it's about, like, for example, our pancreas releases some of its digestive juices from about 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if you're eating out of that time frame, that might impact your sleep. Creating a healthy sleep environment. For most people, that's a cool, uncluttered environment. Too hot and it's going to be difficult to sleep. And having a consistent sleep routine. So going to bed and waking up at the same time every night, even on the weekends, and prioritizing your sleep. So if you're living with a lot of people that maybe aren't prioritizing sleep, having that conversation with them and your sleep needs too. But I'm going to show you a little bit about the Study Skills Academy with the few minutes we have. But while I'm doing that, if you could type any maybe other ideas you have to help with sleep, that would be great. So this is our website, and I'm going to type it in the chat. It's success.wayne.edu. And I want to take you to, and I'm kind of scrolling around this, so it might look a little bit different for you. But here we have the Academic Success Center, and I'm going to show you right here. You can probably see the tabs, the different services we offer. So we have one-to-one study skills counseling. I'm going to click on this. And as I said before, we can offer you a wide variety of different topics to work on you with. Of course, the traditional study skills topics like how to prep for exams, how to study efficiently. Everything we talk about is based on research. We don't just tell you, hey, this is what worked for me. We actually go in and read research articles or textbooks that are in line with this information. So we talk about those traditional study skills, but also we talk about topics like sleep, like stress, like focus, procrastination, all of those things that might impact your ability to succeed at Wayne State. If you are interested, you can click on the link here and fill out a request form, and I'll match you up with a specialist. They'll work with you to create an individualized plan for your success. And remember, all of this is free, okay? We have different groups. We have procrastination accountability groups. You can go on our website and check out the link and when they're available. They're all gonna meet on Zoom. We have procrastination accountability groups, succeeding in the sciences groups, academic stress support groups. And then we also have workshops throughout the semester, and we have FYS 1010. If any of you are taking FYS 1010, write yes in the chat. I'm teaching a couple sections of this class. You might be in my class too. And we actually have a whole lesson about sleep. So we will dive deeper, and we have a great textbook too that's, again, all based on science. So you will get a lot of great information on that. So stay tuned too. And again, even if you are taking FYS, taking advantage of one-to-one study skills counseling and also the groups will be very beneficial. We know that, again, your students are going through a lot right now, and we are here full force to help you succeed. We want you to succeed. Please feel free to reach out to me if you do have any questions. Use me for a source of support, but I also want to type in our handle. We're on social media, so we're on Instagram and we're on Twitter. I promise you we're not going to bombard you with a bunch of boring things. We're not going to look at your personal stuff. So if you follow us, we're not going to follow you back to, protect your privacy and all of that. But we do have some tips on there. We also have our events, so you can keep track of when those things are available. And then I'm just going to write